It's a special honor for me to welcome the members of our distinguished panel here this afternoon. Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez represents the California 47th Congressional District. She was elected to Congress in November 1996 and was re-elected to her current fourth term in November 2002 with 60% of the vote. This year, Congresswoman Sanchez was selected by the Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi to serve as the third-ranking Democrat of the Select Committee for Homeland Security, the most important committee today, perhaps, in the Congress. She has championed federal initiatives to involve parents in their children's schools. She has successfully saved national gender equity in our federal education programs, and she has spearheaded efforts to promote school safety. Our second panelist, as Governor of Massachusetts, Jayne Swift rose to the challenge of holding the highest job in our state. In addition to being the first woman governor in history of Massachusetts, and a very long history at that, Governor Swift is also the first governor in the United States to give birth to twins while serving in office. I think we're all familiar with that. Her career as an elected official began at the age of 25 when she became the youngest woman ever elected to the Massachusetts State Senate. She also quickly became the youngest woman in Massachusetts Senate history to hold a leadership position when she rose to the rank of Assistant Minority Leader in the Massachusetts Senate. As Carol has indicated, we regret to announce that Geraldine Ferraro, a wonderful friend and leader across our country and friend of the Kennedy Library, regrets that she's unable to join us this afternoon because of illness, and we hope very much to reschedule an opportunity for her to be here in the near future, as she has been in the past. Our moderator this evening is Martha Raddatz, Senior National Security Correspondent for ABC News. Most recently, Martha was the Pentagon correspondent for National Public Radio, where she reported on foreign policy, defense, and intelligence issues, and I should say where I came to know her when our children were at school together. And at least one of our children is here today. She was also involved in reporting on the war on Bosnia, and I was a State Department official and diplomat, and that's where we became acquainted. Martha, I'm very pleased to turn this over to you after finally announcing that you, of course, have won so many distinguished awards for your reporting that I can't mention them all, but we're very honored to have you here with us today. Martha.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here, and one thing John did not mention is that I used to work for the local affiliate, the ABC affiliate here for many, many years, 12 years, so it's great to be back home here and see a lot of old friends. I, in the last couple of weeks, have been thinking about this panel and thinking about the gains that women have made, and I ran across an op-ed piece that I thought was great, and it's particularly titled well today because it's called Girls, Girls, Girls. Pretty good for us, I think. This is written by a retired Army officer, just so I can bring a little bit of my world into yours, and so you don't stereotype all Army officers. He says, the greatest social change in the history of humanity happened in the United States over the past 50 years. Women broke their ancient chains and became men's partners instead of remaining men's property. This shift in the status of women is the decisive strategic factor of our time. Women's self-emancipation is a primary source of America's present power, wealth, and social energy. It is also the fundamental reason why we're getting ahead economically. Rosie the Riveter is in the boardroom. She flies combat aircraft. She's a lawyer, a doctor, a cop, and sometimes still a factory worker. In every role she fills, She's the real hero of postmodern America. Never before has any society been so open to talent, no matter its gender, race, ethnicity, or religion. Certainly there are still glass ceilings, but another one shatters each day. Human capital is a nation's ultimate resource, and no society has ever used its human capital as efficiently and effectively as we do. I thought that was great until I opened up the New York Times Magazine this morning, which says, many high-powered women today don't ever hit the glass ceiling, choosing to leave the workplace for motherhood. Is this the failure of one movement or the beginning of another? We're going to talk about that in a minute. I would first of all, I'm very honored to be with both of you. And I'm sorry Geraldine Ferraro isn't here as well. So I would like to start with both of your thoughts about what Geraldine Ferraro meant to you, did for you as a woman in politics. Governor, why don't you start?
I think that it is important, and I probably can speak more credibly as a mother of 3 daughters than from my own experiences, for our children and for girls to see women in particular roles. And in a very meaningful way, I think when you see someone who looks like you or who you could envision being doing something, then it opens up your mind to the world of possibilities. And I think certainly Geraldine Ferraro was that representation to many women who saw her taking her licks just like the guys, but moving forward and making her case to the American people. And that has at times been brought home to me. I had the great privilege of serving as the governor of this Commonwealth, and that brings with it wonderful opportunities that lose something in the translation. But because we're in the same season, I can try to relate to you an experience I had in Salem, Massachusetts, as luck would have it, on Halloween Day. I was not in Salem to celebrate Halloween. I was there to talk about education, which is something I enjoyed talking about and working on a great deal when I was governor. And there was a little girl who her teacher and principal in the cafeteria, I think she was in first grade, but she could have been kindergarten, sort of pushed her up very reluctantly. She was reluctant to see me and had her recount with some assistance the fact that she had decided that she wanted to be governor when she grew up. And her teachers later told me that she had made this decision, and she was one of the shyest kids in her class, and told her parents that after seeing me on television one night. Now, it's probably the only person I inspired in my appearance that night on television, but it just demonstrates, and this doesn't happen a lot because the state of Massachusetts is a big state, but I actually ran into her father at another event several months later, who told me that even though she was reticent to share that experience with me when we had met in the she was much more interested in telling me she was going to be a kitten for Halloween, but in the cafeteria on Halloween day, that it had meant something to her. And so I think to the degree that we have a visual representation of the enormous opportunities that I do believe exist for our daughters, that's important. And I think we're all grateful to Geraldine Ferraro for being that representation, having the courage to put herself out there in a number of different races and a number of different times. And I, too, am sorry she's not with us today to hear that gratitude from those of us who had the wonderful opportunity to follow in her footsteps.
I just followed her around that year, if I recall. That was also great.
Well, of course, we all love Geraldine. And, you know, at that time, during that election, I actually was living in Europe. I was finishing up my master's in my master's in business administration. I did international finance. And I lived in Italy, and I was trying to get a job in Italy. And, of course, women really aren't allowed to work there, at least not, you know, out front. Maybe you work in the submerged economy selling something, but it was just a very interesting experience trying to break into the work world in Italy. And At the same time, I was reading the international newspapers that would tell us that Geraldine was the running mate and she was out there campaigning. I'm thinking, God, what a great place America is, you know? Why is it that I'm here in Italy and I can't get a job, and, you know, because I'm a woman? And that, I mean, people would actually say to me, you're a woman. And so I'm thinking, I can't wait to get back to the United States and get a job there. I'll show them. So I come back to the United States, and lo and behold, you know, I did 14 years in the investment banking industry, and I found out sometimes it's just as difficult for women to get the job they want out here in America as it was to try to find any kind of decent job in Italy. She definitely broke barriers for a lot of people, young people, I think, in particular. Because, for example, in my district lives the young lady who's in Geraldine's book on the shoulders of her father with, Geraldine's T-shirt during the campaign. And I look at this and I see our young ladies moving forward and wanting to be in politics, and I think she was an incredible breaker of the barrier. And it's always important to have a visual person in front of you. And I think back to this election that we had in the Congress, for example, of Nancy Pelosi being our Democratic leader. I happen to hang out in the Blue Dog Caucus of the Democrats. Those are the Southern white boys. The conservatives, you know. Well, I come from Orange County, most Republican place in the nation. And but I'm a Democrat, in case you didn't know that. So you can clap for that. So I'm hanging out in this caucus, and these guys are like, oh, you know. I mean, we had decided that we needed Nancy as our leader, meaning the Californian Democrats, right? Because we used to have someone in leadership and they stepped down. We went for 2 years in a void. We decided we're the largest contingent to the Democratic caucus. We need to have a Democrat from California in the leadership. We saw that there was going to be an opening in about 18 months. And, you know, we wanted George Miller to run, or, well, that's what Nancy said, let's get George Miller to run. Well, George didn't want to do it. And so we were all scratching our heads, and I kept telling George, Nancy, 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 you know, we got to run Nancy. She's perfect for this. Of course, Nancy never saw herself as a leader. I mean, she didn't see herself in the elected leadership. And so we finally convinced her to do it. But it was really interesting to watch her, because it was like, do I have the qualifications? It's like, come on, Nancy, I mean, you've got great skills here. So we talked her into doing it. And I realized at that point that Nancy hadn't seen that possibility for herself because there hadn't been a woman in a high elected position like that. And of course, to convince our own Democratic caucus, majority being male, was even more difficult. And it was interesting to see the double standard that gets applied to a woman who decides to do something, even within the Democratic Party. I kept asking her, let's get you going, let's start the race. No, it's too early, there's no position. So what, Nancy, you know? She goes, okay, one day, she said, okay, what do we do? And I said, we're going to hold these dinner parties, and I'm going to invite my 15 best friends in the Congress, and we're going to feed them, and ply them with liquor. And we'll get these guys to commit to you. So I started holding these dinner parties where we'd get, like, out of the 15, we'd get 10 of them to say yes, and pretty soon we had a good amount, and then I got their friends to, I ran out of friends in the Congress, and then we got some of those guys to get their friends in, and pretty soon, it was about 210 Democrats. You need about 108 votes to win. We had about 100 committed to, and all of a sudden, I get a call from the reporter of the Hill, the rag on everything that goes on in the Congress, about how the opposition is now complaining that we started the race too early. And my comment in the paper was something to the effect of, if we would wait for these guys to tell us when the election was going to start, it would be the day after they had 100 votes lined up. So this whole issue of the vision of seeing women actually break those barriers, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats, is very important to young women, I think.
When you watch Geraldine Ferraro, or when you watch any woman in a position of prominence, do you find yourself doing what the media always talks about, which is scrutinizing more because they're women? And do you ever, either one of you, remember anything specific about, oh, I wish she hadn't said that, or I wish she hadn't done that, or maybe you should talk about this one?
I probably shouldn't have a well-documented ability to get myself in trouble.
Me too.
I can't imagine you ever saying anything you didn't mean to say.
It's not that I didn't mean it, it's that I shouldn't have said it. I think that there is somehow this belief that all of the time women think differently than men. And in fact, that's not the case. And we are prone to the same wonderful attributes and less endearing qualities that some of our male counterparts are. I do believe that we, and I'll admit that I, tend to apply the same, maybe higher standard or different standard. I always think it's important that we know that the standards often are different. That doesn't mean they always work to our disadvantage. There are times, I think back to my first race, where I'd be willing to bet that the 7-year state representative who ran against me for the state senate, I was 25 years old, he had a very accomplished background in the House of Representatives, would articulate that my appearance and my gender and my youth, which he, I think, early on calculated would be detriments, in that particular political year were probably the strongest recommendation that I had, not knowing it, for people to vote for me, because people were demanding change. They didn't like the status quo. And a 47-year-old male lawyer on a billboard looked like the status quo, and a 25-year-old woman did not look like the status quo. And so I do think people respond to us differently, but I also know from experience, and I'm certain had I lost that first race, I would have done something sensible like go to law school and never have done all the things that happened since. So I'm always facing the reality that, well, yeah, we might be judged differently or we may be different. That's not always accruing to the negative. I think the trick is to figure out when the things about us that the general public, who are the electorate, perceive as different, how do they accrue to our benefit, and how do we play up those things, because it's all about winning in the end, and how do we, at the same time that wonderful people like the Center for Women in Politics are trying to change what is, how do those of us who are running try to minimize the perceptions that people might have that would hurt us, and elevate and put forward a stronger argument for those perceptions people may have about women's leadership that help us in a given context, because the political climate matters. I think your former governor or current governor, who's soon to be former governor, would agree with that. Many times you can't rise above the current political climate, so the trick is, whether you're a woman or a man, to understand how people perceive you, what their belief system is, and without being dishonest, utilize that to put forward the best possible argument for your candidacy.
You both talk about having this visual image of a politician with Geraldine Ferraro on the national stage, but whenever I cover anything important still, whether it's certainly at the Pentagon, this happens, on the Hill, I still look out in those scenes and say, nobody can tell me this is not still a man's world. There are not a lot of female faces on the Hill. There are not an enormous amount of female faces in any localities. Why not, and what can you do to change it?
Well, first of all, you have to win elections. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to win elections. And the first thing we have is that women don't make themselves candidates. And, you know, they think politics is dirty, they don't want to do it, they don't see themselves in that role.
So do men. So start there.
No,
why
stop
are
already.
Different there?
No, stop
they do,
already.
But they still go for it.
Look, we go and we ask a man to run for a congressional seat. And he starts ticking off all the things that he needs. Well, the Democratic Party's got to give me $2 million, and I need this fundraiser, and I need that pollster, and I mean, he's making demands. And we go and we ask a woman to run, and she's like, well, am I qualified? I mean, they're the most qualified people in the world, but they doubt themselves because, you know, it's the same thing like when Nancy said, well, could I be leader? I mean, because we don't see ourselves in those roles. So the first thing is women got to decide they're just going to do it. It's going to be ugly. It's going to, you know, they're going to throw garbage at you all day long, but you have got to become candidates before we're ever even going to get you elected, because if you're not on the ballot, you can't get elected. That's well, there was a woman actually that got a write-in ballot. It was great to see in California. But anyway, pretty much you got to be on the ballot in order to win. That's the first thing. The second thing, the institutions, the political parties, the machinery, the money raising, whether it's Republican or Democrat. I'm a Democrat. I love being a Democrat. I think we have great policies for women and things of that sort. But I'm talking about the machinery of the parties in particular. It's all run by Anglo-males, and it's for Anglo-males, and pretty much they don't take a look at women. They don't consider women. They look at themselves in the same, you know, if we're looking for a congressional candidate, it's usually an Anglo colleague, male colleague of mine who's the recruiter, and he goes out and he calls his friends at the state level. Who's the state senator there? Well, usually it's a white male, and he's got the best name ID, so let's go talk to him and give him the goods and have him run. They never sit there and go, well, might not be a woman who hangs out there as a state senator, but maybe there's a good businesswoman or there's someone involved in the community. So the recruiting doesn't happen for women. The money doesn't happen for women. The machinery of the parties don't, and this happens, look, I'm in Republican Orange County. They don't run women there either. Women have to run against the Republican machinery, just like in a lot of cases, any of the women who've gotten to the Congress have usually run against the Democratic machinery or whatever the machinery is. So we don't have the institutions, whether it's the DNC or the RNC or anything like that, they really aren't ready to hand over the power to women. You know, power is never given. You always have to take it. You know, and we do not control those levers of power. We make it despite the fact that they put all the obstacles in front of us. And they don't tell us the rules of the game. They tell us the formal rules. They don't tell us the real informal rules, like money counts in an election. You know, it's like, oh, you're so nice. Oh, you have a good presence. Oh, you're so good on policy. Oh, this, and, you know, it's like, oh, you should run. You speak well. You know, what they don't tell you is, how can you raise $2 million? You know, we don't know the real rules.
And how do you figure those out, Governor Swift? How did you figure out those rules, or some of them anyway?
Well, I guess I don't want to be disagreeable, but I believe the reason that Paul Cellucci asked me to be his running mate in 1998 was because I had raised $1 million in a congressional run a year earlier, and because I had a geographic base that was different than his, that in a close election mattered. So I think that the first thing we have to do is not focus as much on all the barriers and start focusing to a certain degree on the opportunities and what a huge difference you can make when you're there. And I'll tell you how I raised $1 million. It's probably the same way the Congresswoman raised $1 million. I asked people for it. It's a shocking admission. But people also don't give you money unless you ask for it. Now, when I went to campaign school, and I would bet you get the same instructions at the Democratic campaign school as you did at the Republican campaign school, which is to call people who have money and ask them if they can give it to you. I knew that I wouldn't like doing that, and alas, I did not like doing it. But I knew that I liked losing less. And so I decided that I would call and ask people for money. And it was really frustrating to me that the more time I spent asking people to give me money, the more money I raised. And the more money I raised, the more people were willing to give me money. And so I think there are good organizations now, bipartisan and partisan, whether it's WISH on the Republican side or the Women's Campaign Fund, who are giving candidates those instructions. And I think it's important for us to tell all of you who are at a certain level or thinking of running that actually if you do the things they tell you, it works, or at least try it and see if it works. But for me, it's a very different mode of campaigning. I loved campaigning for the state senate, where I could go out and shake hands with people and stand in front of, minor league baseball stadiums and talk to little kids. And that was nice because it both worked and it was effective, and it also was something I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy so much when I was running for Congress, sitting in my house for 6 hours each week, calling people, asking them for money. But I did enjoy having enough money to tell my story on television and to run a credible race. I had not to that date lost a race, but my insight, and I'm not particularly self-reflective, but my insight that I would hate losing turned out to be true.
So how do you stimulate young women? Let's talk to young women. Let's talk to, my 22-year-old daughter there. How do you stimulate young women to go into politics? Particularly you, who just had a lot of rotten things to say about it.
I love politics. Okay, well, first of all, look, I was working in the investment banking industry, okay? So that's totally white male run, it's no different. People ask me how different it is to work in the Congress. It's not that much different. I walked into the Congress the first day. Now remember, I'm from California. I'm from a pretty diverse kind of a state, and I go walking into the state, into the new Capitol on my first day, and I walk in there, and I remember just my mouth dropped open because, it's older Anglo males. I mean, that's the majority of what sits there. So how do we stimulate young women to be in that chamber also? We have to begin at a young age with them. At the same time that I got elected, there was this guy, he took his dad's seat, who was a Democrat. He had run for the Congress. He was not yet 25. You have to be 25 in order to be put into the House of Representatives. He was 24. He would be 25 by the time it was time to swear him in. But when he won his election, he was 24. I mean, here's a guy that started running from the very get-go, so that when he gets into the House, he's 25, so that when he's got 20 years seniority, he owns the place. Women don't do that. I mean, here's Nancy Pelosi. She's 6. Well, I don't want to tell her age. But, I mean, she's over 60. Let's put it that way. Almost all the women in the House are over 60, some 70. We just lost Patsy Mink last year in her 80s. I mean, when I got to the House, the women were so giddy because, and I didn't realize why, and they said, you don't understand. I mean, you're coming at the House at 36, and you're going to have enough time to get seniority. We're going to be able to place you well on committee. You're going to be able to make it to the White House. Whereas most of them had done other things, had their kids, worked at the local level, got into politics at 50 or so. They got into the House. It was too late to get seniority. They just didn't see it there. And I was kind of laughing because I'm thinking they got to be 25 when we get them in. Like this guy who came in. This guy who came in at 24, but, really was 25. And it was just so interesting because these guys just have a different frame of mind. He came in and I said, well, we were being asked, what committees do you want to sit on? He goes, I'm going to be on Ways and Means. Well, that's the taxing committee. This guy had gone to college, he was in law school, he ran for Congress, he'd never had a job, and yet he thought he could tax people. I just looked at him, I said to him, I don't think so. To this day, he's not on taxing committee, and there's a good reason why. But, they just think they can. So we have got to raise our young ladies to think they can. I look at my sister, she's, people say, oh, you're so young, when they mean, my sister, she's in the Congress, she's 10 years younger. 10 years younger. She has a degree from Berkeley. She speaks 4 languages. She's a UCLA law graduate. She's a civil rights attorney. She was the head of the labor movement in my county. And now she's in the Congress. That's prepared. That's what we need to do. We need to start them young. We need to tell them they can. We need to push them to have the pedigree that they're going to need to get to these positions. We need to put them on campaigns, and we've got to make them understand that even though they're learning to raise money or they're learning to walk precincts, they're not going to do that all their lives for this guy who's going to be the candidate. They've got to learn it so they can decide that they like it so that we can run them. I really feel that that's the way we break those barriers.
Can we take a crack at that one?
I think that the only thing I would say to build on the Congresswoman's statement is we also have to share with them that, while there may be things that are hard, life is hard. I think we all tell our kids that every single day, particularly when we know another good answer. But, life is hard, and there are a lot of things you'll do that'll be hard, but you know what? It's wonderful. Yeah. I have memories and had experiences that I'll have for the rest of my life of being able to help someone or make a difference on an issue that I cared about that I never imagined that I would have, and I'm extremely grateful for. And maybe we need to have forums where we don't just talk about how hard it is, but we talk about the wonderful things that you get to do, because there is no better feeling than seeing a problem, and we all see problems every day, but being in a position where you can fix the problem. Now, you also have those days where you find a problem that you don't know the answer or the perfect fix to, but it's not for power's sake, but seeing a problem like foster children who never got placed in a foster home and turn 18, and they go to school. 10% of kids who age out of our foster program in Massachusetts were going to college, when the statewide average was something like 75% or even higher. And so it was kind of surprised me how relatively easy it was. All due respect to my former legislative colleagues, we didn't need them to make it happen. And so we called in some folks from the higher education department and said, we want you to offer free tuition and board to kids who age out of the foster system. There's a tiny percentage of them who are in that situation, and we did it. And that is actually a pretty great feeling to be able to do. So we need to tell more of those stories, I think.
I want to go back to the New York Times Magazine today. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it's the cover story here about, if I can find the cover here. Why don't more women get to the top? They choose not to. And in this article, which is excellent, and they point out, as Governor Swift pointed out to me today, a lot of people don't choose to work, so we will say that right away. But this talks about a lot of young women and older women who are law school graduates, who've been in politics, who've done all kinds of amazing things, and they want out, and they want home, and they want to spend time with their families. I have to say that I reflect on this all the time, and I think about what I tell young women who say, how do you do that? How do you do this? How do you have 2 kids? How do you? And I never, ever say anymore, oh, you can do it all. I never say that. I'm very, very careful about that, to say that it's hard, that it is difficult, that there is a serious degree of management that goes on between both of them, and all women do this, and men do it as well. But are women choosing this over careers because of mistakes, perhaps, that the women's movement made, because of what women were told going into life or going into careers? Were we, in a way, too optimistic about what you can do?
I talk a lot about how the conversations I have with my children, my daughters, might be different than the ones I had at home. But I don't blame women who broke down all those barriers that gave me the wonderful opportunities that I've had. And I also don't think we can expect those women who are breaking down the barriers but didn't have the experience to have somehow seen into a crystal ball in the future and told us how hard it was going to be when they didn't know, because they were too busy trying to create the opportunities. They didn't necessarily always have them. I think, and you issued the caveat, and I will, first of all, as public policy folks, and I'm not one anymore, so this is advice, probably unwanted advice, first of all, we need to focus more of our efforts in creating more parity on the 70% of women who don't have choices. And then I think rather than engaging in a debate, and I'm susceptible to it, I was sharing earlier, my sister, who's going to kill me, but my sister has a master's from Penn, and she's home with her 2 children, and we have not debates, discussions all the time about the different choices that we made. And I think what we don't want to have is this belief that for the small percentage of women who do have choices, that your choice is right and your choice is wrong. I think we should be glad that more women have more choices, try to provide more choices to more women in the lower income levels, and then figure out what new challenges that creates in the workforce and what additional barriers we need to break down. And one of those barriers is if you have the luxury to choose not to work for pay, because I will tell you, I spent a little time at home before I went back to work full time. That's harder work than what I do every day, taking care of 3 young children. So, but those who choose not to work for pay, how do we help them better integrate back into the workforce? Because there really hasn't been a pattern of women totally stopping work who have MBAs, who have law degrees, and how do they reintegrate? And I think some good people are starting to think through those issues, but that's going to be the next challenge, is can they come back without, I don't think we should all get mad at them because they decide not to do it. I think we should celebrate they had that choice.
But tell me what you think it says about society. I don't see many articles about men suddenly saying, you know what, I think I'll go home and spend more time.
No, you know, I can tell you from that experience, there was a front page article in Newsweek in April before we invaded Iraq, so I don't read things as much.
That would be February.
Okay, February, March, maybe? Maybe it was after. But anyway, there was an article this spring in Newsweek about the growing number of men who are choosing to stay at home. And some startling and disturbing poll results, it didn't surprise me at all, that a lot of people think that that's not a good thing, to have women working and earning more money than their husbands and men staying at home. So when people choose different arrangements, change is threatening. And so some people, rather than dealing with their own issues of how they're going to manage things, would rather sort of talk about the bad way everybody else they know is doing it. So I think that there is a growing number of men who are choosing to stay at home. Again, it's in this very small percentage of people who have choices, but we have different sentiments about that. I mean, nobody gets mad at my husband that he's letting down all of, malehood by staying home with his kids, and he's not. He's doing a great thing. Similarly, nobody should be mad at women who are making that choice. We should embrace it, figure out what additional challenges it implies, and go about tackling them. I'm a pragmatist.
You know, I agree with everything that Jayne has said, by the way, and Governor. I like that title for you. But anyway, when I first ran, when I was going door to door in my first campaign, I was going through, I come from a very conservative area, and a lot of the women would be home, and I would be campaigning, and I'd go through, why I thought I would make a good congressperson. And it was interesting to hear the responses that I got from women. Oh, Loretta, you sound like you're so qualified, and that's so great, but I just don't believe women should be working out of the home. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Loretta, you sound so qualified, and I like you and everything. I'm going to let my husband know when he goes to fill out my ballot. And the list went on and on. And it was interesting because we polled 3 weeks before the election, and Bill Clinton this was in '96, was on the ballot also. Bill Clinton had an 18% gender gap positive by women voting for him. I was on the ticket. I was the woman on the ticket. I had no gap. In other words, women weren't voting for me. Then I ran. I won. Bob Dornan contested the election. It made me go through hell. We re-polled about we repolled in February because we thought we might have to run the election again. That was after the January 20th inauguration of Bill Clinton, where I had sewn my own ball gown for the inauguration. And the front page of my hometown newspaper and the LA Times and everything had me sitting there sewing it, and they had me in it at the ball place and everything. We polled a month later. Now I had like a 30% gender gap. Women loved me. And when we asked them, why would you vote for Loretta Sanchez? They said, well, she's just like me. She sews. So I guess what I'm saying is, the first thing is that women have to accept women. We have to accept all the qualities of a woman. We have to stop being so judgmental about each other. We have to accept each other. And I see that most when I go around and women meet me and they say, oh, I'm just a housewife, or oh, I just stay at home with the kids. I mean, they feel with no value. And I look at them, I'm thinking, you are doing one of the most important jobs in the world. You are raising the future of our country. Why is it that women themselves feel undervalued? They undervalue themselves. Oh, I'm just a housewife. Well, no, you're not married to a house. I have 2 kids. I know you don't think that's very important, Congresswoman. I think that's incredibly important. And I think we should honor that. We should celebrate that. But at the same time, please celebrate that if I choose not to have children, or if I choose not to be at home, that I can in fact be a good government person, that I can be a good congressperson, that I could be a governor, that I could be a president in the White House. Please, I honor what you want to do. Please honor what I want to do. If we would be more like that, especially the women, then I think we would see a lot more women in politics and as CEOs and other things.
I think I'm going to open it up to questions, but I wanted to say just one thing about this. I certainly think being home is an honorable profession as well, but I think one of the points of this article is that are women doing this because they're not getting enough help in this realm? And do I have to make the choice, because I'm not getting enough help from my spouse or from society, that you can't do both, and because these are my children, I'm going to make that choice? I certainly honor anyone who makes the choice for whatever reason they want to do it. So let's open it up to questions for Governor Swift and Congresswoman Sanchez. Anybody? You want to go? Yes. Why don't you just go up to the microphones? That'd probably be the best thing.
I have a question which is in direct response to what both of you were just saying a moment ago. I am a woman who has 2 children, works full-time, has never taken time off. And I feel, and I don't know if you have any comments on this, that there's a pressure for many women to not work full-time with small children and to do that. And I think that some of you have direct comments on that. And so that pressure, I mean, you were talking about devaluing staying at home. I think there's also a devaluing of women who work and who choose to send their children to childcare. Another thing, too, and this goes again to what the Congresswoman was saying, I'm on a city committee and was recently asked to chair it. And I said, no, I can't. I am working full-time. I work with the Million Mile March. I'm very active. I care about that cause. And when I have free time, I like to go to my children's soccer games. Well, when I went to the meeting where it was told that I refused the position, the reason that was given to the city council was because I was a soccer mom. Now, again, thinking about the credentials that you have, in terms of when I said I couldn't take this position, I said I'm working full time, I'm involved in another important organization, and I have a family. And it seems as if I was valuing what I do, but it was devalued for me. And so I think that those 2 reasons are things we haven't talked about, and I'd just like your comments on that.
Well, I don't have children, so it's hard for me to even understand what it all takes to get children done, if you will. done the right way, by the way. The governor will probably speak to that, hopefully.
And they're never done. No.
But, and that's the scary part. Look, I come from a large family, 7 kids, right? Now, I was the oldest daughter, so I got to bring up my 2 younger brothers and sisters. I knew, all the romance of bringing up children to some extent was used in the, when I was 14 and 15. But, it comes down to the fact that I think people are happiest when they have choices, when they feel like they have choices. The thing that I see least when I see people where they really are unhappy, they don't tell you I'm unhappy, but it's, they can't leave their job. They hate their job, but they can't leave their job because they're tied to it by the health care plan, or they've got kids at home, they're trapped, or, whatever it is. And this happens to men and to women. They feel trapped. They feel like they have no choices. They feel like they can't change their job, like they can't stay home, like people aren't going to value them, like, oh God, people are saying bad things because the nanny's taking care of them. I think we have to be just a little bit more open to letting people have those choices. If they have those choices and they make those choices, we should try to be as positive about the choices as they make. And I think it's a really sad commentary when you list the 3 reasons why you don't have time to do something you might actually like to do, and the only thing they come up with is, well, you're a soccer mom. I mean, that tells me that society is still not valuing a working woman or somebody who's trying to be supportive of their spouse, whether it's a husband or a wife, that somehow the excuse is, oh, she's busy with the kids. So I guess I would just say, I don't know how we change society's take on this other than to have more people speak about it. I know when I give interviews to magazines, women's magazines in particular, I honor and I celebrate the fact that some women stay home, can stay home. Most of our women don't have choices, as the governor pointed out earlier. There are a lot of single moms, moms left behind with kids, having to work minimum wage jobs. Why don't we do something about putting in the planks in place for good child care? So that our moms don't feel, God, I'm leaving my kids and it's killing them, that something might be going wrong. And at the same time, we're thinking child care is so terrible. How could this mom leave her kid with these child care providers? I mean, we have to really think as a society how we help women and men to make good choices in their lives, to get their talents into the workplace or into the home place.
I think, Governor, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go to another question so we can get more questions in. Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Beth Boland, and I'm a partner in a law firm here in town. And I wanted to go back to that issue about the message that we give about life is hard. Because I found out something actually last week that astounded me, which is that in a couple of the offices, I'm in a national law firm, in a couple of our offices, we have like 60% women associates. But when you look at the partnership ranks, it's like 20%. Even in those offices that have a ton. And I was asking some of the women, I said, why is that? How come that pipeline?
16%. It's in this article.
It
is.
Partners.
It is. Yes.
There was just the EEOs.
50% of the graduating class of 2003 at Yale was female.
Yeah.
16% of partners.
Yes, and one of the thing that I learned was that in talking about these women associates, they said, well, they don't want to be like us. I thought, wow, And that issue of life is hard, I mean, I have 3 kids too. And I use life is hard to them when they want like the 10th dessert, sort of thing. But that message about what to suggest to those women who are, especially, and these are women who are really talented, who are going up. And I think to myself, especially when I heard a couple of the folks up there on the stage say, well, life is hard, and that is a message that we give. Is that really the right message? It may be very realistic, but, how realistic do we want it to be if we want to show people that the brass ring is really out there and they can go out and get it.
Well, can I just because I started this, I just want to say one very quick little thing.
Clarification.
I don't want, I mean, it's like when you're told pregnancy is wonderful. Sorry, you know, it really isn't. And when my friends are pregnant, I tell them the truth from my perspective. You know, it's wonderful, you can do it, it's a fabulous experience, but there's parts of it that really stink. And I think that's what I tell young people, that you can't do anything, and that's always a message I got in life, and I believe it, and I believe all of us can, and I believe we can change our minds, and I believe if we're not doing so well today, we can do better next week. But at the same time, I think it's important to give young women in particular information, so when they go to work and it's hard and it's much more difficult to come home and feed the baby and take care of a sick kid and look great at the office and do everything well, that they don't think they're alone, and they don't think they're doing something wrong, and they don't think, oh God, you know, my mother did it, or this woman, this partner at the law firm did it, why can't I? I think you need to be realistic with young women.
I would absolutely agree, and it's sort of the summary of my work family speech. I say there are 4 things we should do: paid family leave for low and middle income working women. We should do, but one of them is to still inspire our daughters, but to steel them with the information that they need so that they can deal with the difficult things. And I don't think we tell them it's just hard to go to work, because I can tell you from the friends I have, it's hard to stay home. There's a lot of, having kids, and this is probably for the, 15 and 16-year-old girls out there. Having kids is hard. It's a really hard thing to do. It's the most wonderful thing you'll ever do, but it's hard, and it's hard whatever choice. And I'll just go back to the last question. This is an observation, not an answer. What's really interesting is if you talk to women who are working and have children, they'll tell you they don't think other people value their choices. And then I'll talk to my friends who are staying at home, who are not working for pay, and they'll say, people look down on me and they don't value my choices. And then you'll talk to women who are working part-time, the few who can find that wonderful middle ground that it doesn't seem to be realistic for as many people as it should. And they'll say, I think the people who work full-time don't appreciate the value that I bring to the office, and I think the moms that I see at the playground who are staying home don't really consider me part of their group. Now, there are probably a couple other variations of that. At a certain point, when everybody is trying to do it, and we all, at the end of the day, come up with our own answer for how to do it, and we all feel like nobody values our choices, maybe that says something about us rather than them.
Yeah, it does. But I do think we need to give a round of applause to both the governor and the congresswoman. I mean, for the role models that you both are, that you have reached out and grabbed the brass ring. You have.
Oh, now we're getting the long line here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Julia Tripp, and I'm a consultant with the Center for Social Policy, UMass, Boston. I'm also here as a representative of the Speak Up Initiative, and there are 20 women in this audience here tonight who have been invited from across New England to participate in this conference and bring about diversity. First of all, I want to thank you for the insightful statements that you've made. And as I listened to your comments, we had developed a set of questions, and one of them I'm sort of building on. So I have 2 questions. One is, what are, Representative Sanchez, this is directed to you, and the other question either or both of you can answer. You spoke of your sister's pedigree, and she, I think, chose to stay home, or that might have been Jayne Swift's sister, but you spoke of her pedigree, her preparation, her education, being pushed, and all of the wonderful things that set her up for running for office. But what are the strategies that a poor person, what's a poor person's pedigree to prepare them for running for office? And you talk also about it being a hard life. I know that as a woman that has had a very hard life, and I'm a little over 25, so it's kind of late for me to sort of start really young. But what are the strategies you would recommend to a poor person? What's a poor person's pedigree made up of? That's question 1. And
let's stop right there. Let's let her answer question 1.
Oh, okay.
Well, what's a poor person's pedigree? That's interesting. If you're still poor at, well, first of all, and this is what I tell to anybody who's interested in going into the political arena, and you want to be a candidate, you want to be an office holder. First of all, have an education. Now, regardless of how poor you are, most people can get some kind of education. I know we make it harder every single day, and I don't agree with some of our national and state policies, for example, that we're doing to exclude more and more people out of that. But have some sort of education. And secondly, and believe me, I didn't go to Berkeley and Stanford and UCLA as my brothers and sisters did. I did what I could when I was given all the factors of being the first woman in a Hispanic immigrant family, et cetera, with 7 kids, and mom and dad wanting me to go to college but not knowing the differences between college. I mean, my dad wanted me to go to USC because it had a good football team. It sounds, and people laugh, but information is paramount for making better decisions. So the first is try to get an education. The second is do something. I don't care if you're the best janitor. Do something. Have some life experience. Be a teacher, be a janitor, be whatever it is you're going to be, but be the best janitor there is. Be good at the job experience that you have. Because then when you become a candidate, you can talk about what you did or how good you were at it or whether you went to work on time. I get so many young people who come out of poli-sci classes, and I don't want to get poli-sci people mad or anything, but, who go and do poli-sci and then come and they say, now I want to be a politician. Well, what kind of experience do you have? Go get a job. Do something. Even if you're just cooking fries, be number one. When my first job was an ice cream scooper. I was the best darn ice cream scooper there was. People came from around to come and hear me scoop ice cream for them. You think I'm kidding, but you should have seen the letters. I still have them written to my manager about, this is the best experience I have on a daily basis, is coming to see this young lady scoop ice cream for me. So, hey, if you're old and you got nothing else to do, your trip down to the ice cream shop may be the highlight of your day. Make it worth it to the person. And then come and work on a campaign. And you're right, it just gets me so upset that I see a lot of young, affluent kids come and work on campaigns because they can come and afford to work for nothing, versus poor kids who probably would do a good job but can't afford and come and do it. And so that's one of the things I think the party should do, is to put more money into young people actually being paid to come and work on a campaign.
Okay, I have to keep this train rolling, and we got a lot of questions. So very briefly with the second one, okay?
I'll make this quickly, is I wanted to ask you, do you see political dynasties being driven by women, i.e. the Sanchez's, however you say that?
Let's go with Governor Swift on this.
Swift twins?
Or the Swift twins.
First of all, their name isn't Swift, so that makes it harder for dynasties. Another thing that women have accomplished is we change names, so it's harder, I guess, to do dynasties when your children have different names. I believe that part of the reason that I got involved in politics was because my dad was a volunteer on campaigns, and I knew people who were involved. And I also should say that don't discount that men can be good role models if they bring women, because it was the state senator who I worked for, and I was 24 years old, and a staff member in his campaign, in his office, who said to me, "I'm not running, and you should run for this office." I decided to do it, but it was him who visualized that I could do it and I could be good at it. And by the way, they ran an ad where my opponent listed, like in single space type, a full page ad of all of his experience, and then listed my experience as a department store clerk. And that's what won me the campaign. So there are times when, having no experience, there were more department store clerks voting in that district than there were lawyers.
I would just say, I would just say that there are political dynasties going on. Nancy Pelosi, for example, her father was the mayor of Baltimore. He was also a Congress member. Her brother was the mayor of Baltimore also. Barbara Kennelly, who was from Connecticut, a high-ranking woman in the House when I arrived there. Her father was God knows who out of Connecticut, who ran the Kennedy campaign actually, or was the DNC chair then. Her brother was the Attorney General of Connecticut. So there are a lot, if you have the dynasties, you have a lot of political power there. You have interest. You have it from a very early age, and so it's flowing into some of the women.
Thank you.
Okay, over here.
Governor Swift, you talked a little bit earlier about having to make phone calls for raising money. I was just wondering, for those low and middle income women who don't have the family finances to help them, what are some of the other ways to get that financial?
Okay, so let me be very clear. I don't have money. And so the reason I had to call and ask for it is because I didn't have the ability to write the check myself. That is the easiest way to raise money, is to have it in your bank account. But you can't, and I will also say something that's probably pretty provocative. Every time well-intentioned people change the rules of how easy or hard it is to raise money, and I understand the reasons they do that, and I don't disagree with the intent, it makes it harder for people who have to raise money, who don't have money, to compete. And so I think we need to have a cautionary tale that it's the people who don't have money who have to raise it. The people who have money, we don't have to worry about because they're all set. And so I would say to you that I don't see that the system's going to change. I didn't know a lot of people. I called strangers and asked them for money. I didn't go to Harvard. I grew up in North Adams. It's a blue-collar city. My dad was, a plumber, and my mom's a teacher in the Catholic schools. And so we don't have money. And there's this fallacy that somehow if you don't have money, that you can't raise it. Is it a little harder? Sure. But it was harder for me to get into Trinity College, too, because I didn't take that expensive preparation course that some kids can take to get a higher SAT. We shouldn't use that as an excuse not to do the things that have to be done in order to be successful. And so if you don't have money, I tell you to make twice as many phone calls as a person who does.
Hi, I just wanted to speak to that pedigree issue again, and the gal before me came at it from one way. I wanted to approach it and broaden the scope of it a little bit. For those of us who did not pursue our education because we decided to stay home with families and now again think that maybe it's our time to come out and run for a political office, do you see not having that pedigree as part of the glass ceiling?
Don't take this wrong. I'm talking about, when I envision where we need to be, I envision we need to be in the White House. Okay. So if I'm saying that, I'm saying that the women who will break through to be in the White House are going to have that. Because you all know that they judge us twice as hard. We work twice as hard. We get less of the, of the fanfare, and so we need to be spotless. Whether we like it or not, we need to be totally clean with the best that we can in order to be able to break those barriers. Almost every woman that has gone into the House does not have the kind of pedigree that we're talking about. It just makes it harder. I mean, they've done it despite the fact. All I'm saying is that if we want to make great strides in national politics, into the White House, into owning the chambers, for example, of the Congress, the easiest way for us will be to invest in our young women, to get them ready and to move them in quickly. That's just a long-term strategy for reaching the top echelon. It doesn't mean that we can't get into the House. It doesn't mean that we can't get into the Senate. It just means that the barriers are significant, so it makes it harder for us to do that.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit? That may be a long-term approach. What would you suggest as a shorter-term approach? So I see age differences in this audience here, and it would seem to me that it would take a grassroots women's effort to get those women up into the White House. So for those of us who are willing to work at the grassroots level, what strategies would you recommend for us?
I think that, first of all, you have to be thinking in a different way about the things that you've done. Mm-hmm. Many of the women I know who are at home with their children are doing extraordinary things. They're just not getting paid for them. And actually, that's the more traditional route into state legislatures and into higher offices, is women who have accomplishments in their communities that they can then leverage and relationships they can leverage. And so you just have to think about how you define those differently. but actually your experience is much more reflective of women who are winning seats in the state legislature than mine. And I don't have a higher degree either.
But we just have to look at
You got about 30 seconds.
Elizabeth Dole when she ran for the presidency. Her husband wrote a check to McCain but didn't write money to her. I mean, you know, what does that tell you? It doesn't matter what name we carry, it's just a higher, the White House and the Congress is just a higher level to get yourself into. That doesn't mean that we can't make it.
Thank you.
I think it's about 5:15. We have about 15 minutes for questions, so I'm guessing we have about time for 3 or 4. Go ahead.
My name is Maggie Hassan, and I ran for office for the first time last year, lost, but I ran for state senate in New Hampshire, and it was a wonderful experience. A couple of observations and a question, and I'll be quick. What I heard a lot this morning, this afternoon, is that people were talking about barriers. They certainly are there, but they're talking also about looking at both home life and political life and professional life the way the boys have defined it for us. And we don't need to do that. I have a severely handicapped child, which made me redefine motherhood very early. I needed much more help than the average person needs at home. It has changed the dynamic in my home, but it's also liberated me in a lot of ways. And I think we have to think about doing things differently, not just harder, not just saying life is hard. We are good at that. I work in a law firm that allows me flex time. I define my time. And the reason that law firm works is not only because people thought it was the right thing to do, but because people recognized there was an economic interest in getting lawyers who were talented, whether they be female or male and didn't want to work full time, to work for them. So I think one of our things, I'd like you to comment on it from your own perspective as you could, is what is it that we can do differently? How do we define the tasks in our own way and move forward with them and convince people that it is in their interest to vote for us because of our different approach, not just because we work harder or better or longer. Thank you.
Why don't we do Governor Swift on this one quickly?
I would say that I don't know any family who doesn't find their own way to do things. I don't think we should feel defensive about it. I think, though, we should be pragmatic. The goal is to win. And so you have to be aware of the atmosphere that exists within the district. You're going to make more of a difference if you're there than you are if you're not. And so I'm not telling you to compromise your values, but I'm saying that you're going to have a greater impact to change once you actually have success. And so we have to have equal parts of pragmatism and idealism.
And more law firms like yours, I think.
My name is Mary Ellen Daly O'Brien. I'm just finishing my first term as a city councilor in a community called Haverhill. It's about 60,000 people. I was the only woman elected in the last election out of a 9-seat city council. I'm just finishing up my campaign right now. The vote's next week, but I had to come to this conference because I work full-time as a nurse case manager, which is a very rewarding advocacy role. And I also am the mother of 4 daughters, 10, 12, 18, and 20. Wow. The 10-year-old has been saying since she was 5 that she was going to be president of the United States. Her name is Bridget O'Brien. I just want to put that on.
Okay, do you have a question from Bridget?
But anyways, what I wanted to say was really to Jayne, because when you became lieutenant governor and then governor, a lot of women in this state were just so proud of what you were doing. And my question is, in this campaign, which I did not face the last time, I've had name calling behind my back, but not the nicest names. And I don't find that the fellas do that to each other. And I was wondering if you women have both faced this name-calling issue when you're the only woman or one of just a few. I think that's something we have to face, this name-calling that goes on behind our backs. And I'd be interested in your point of view on that.
I will tell you that every person who runs for political office has to put themselves on the line. And I think the most important thing, and it's probably similar to the advice that we give our children, is that you do yourself what you believe is right. I call it the sleep at night test. So don't fight fire with fire. And secondly, if you can accomplish this, don't let them know it's getting to you. I would take some of the political cartoons that most people would have found the most hurtful of me and get copies of them and frame them and put them in my office. Partly because, don't go into this business if you don't have a sense of humor. Make sure you can sleep at night, because at the end of the day, whatever they say about you is going to be less important than what you feel and your family feels about you. And that is based on what you do, not on what people say about you.
What I've been doing is, when we're in public together, I always shake his hand first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. My name's Lauren Mauriello. I'm from Linfield, Mass. I graduated actually from Mass College of Liberal Arts in North Adams just this May, and I work at the State House. I just started about a month ago. I don't have a question, just a comment. Listening to all three of you, I was a journalism major, so I can relate to you, minor in political science. I ran for selectman in my town when I was 21, last April, and I ran against the incumbent who, he would never tell me his age, but he was old. That's what I used to say.
Now, remember, she's 21, so yeah. Old could be like 36.
No, he was older than 65. And I had a lot of challenges. Number one, I had no name recognition whatsoever in my town of Linfield. It's about a town of about 12,000 very conservative people. He had been a selectman for 4 terms. He had been in the town for 30 years. His mother was he had a lot of name recognition. I ran my race from North Adams in my dorm with all my sorority sisters. We would send out dear friend cards, have my coffees, they'd send out all the invitations. He raised $12,000, I raised $2,000. I had black and white push cards that I made on my computer. He had colored, double-sided.
Okay, advice.
Did you win?
I lost, but I received 48% of the vote.
Yeah.
And it's only inspired me more to run again this next election. I just got appointed to the Finance Committee. But what I wanted to say to you, both of you, is everywhere I went, newspapers followed me, whether I was at a baseball game, at the school, oh, well, look at her, the way she's dressed. My opponent had about 10 suits. I had no suits. I had to save all my money. I had to raise money. I went door knocking, and we'd be like pretty much in the same streets. He'd be a couple houses behind. People would say to me, I don't need any more Girl Scout cookies. Like, honestly, a couple of people, I just faced, but that only inspired me more. And that's what I want to know from you. Like, my parents said, Lauren, you need to know how thick your skin is. And I learned, and I was in the newspaper, people loved me, they hated me, I had people come up to me, what are you, crazy?
I have no experience with that.
You're 21? And that's why, and I admire the both of you, and Governor Swift, coming from North Adams, and I rooted you the whole way, and I just think it's amazing that you're up here. And someone like me, I hope to be up there someday. I want to run for office. I'm looking for presidency. And I just wanted to let you both know that as a young woman in politics, you've inspired me, and I hope that other young girls in here feel the same way. And it can be done.
We hope we see you in Washington, not just here. We'll hold our breath.
I think I might have just got my answer. My name's Annalisa Wolf, and I have been definitely inspired here, not only tonight, but in general, by both Congresswoman and Governor. I've read about you a lot. I've kept track of you. But what I really want to know from you, both on a personal level and as advice, is what should be my baby steps? I really want to be in your shoes. Where do I start?
Education. Do something before you go to politics. Get on a campaign. Learn to see if you like it. Learn how to raise money.
If you get a moment with Senator Kerry, could you ask him if he could pay me?
Okay, I'll tell John that.
I would say there is great experience in working on a campaign. It gives you or working in politics. It gives you exposure to issues, and knowing all the issues, I think, is extraordinarily important. But at the end of the day, and I didn't follow the Congresswoman's advice because I worked in the state Senate and I ran for the state Senate when I was 25 years old. And I would say run for an office not because of where you want to go, but what you want to do. And if you find an issue that is relevant in the area that you live in and an office that can make a difference and you think the opposition isn't doing it, it's very difficult to beat somebody if you agree with them on everything, if they're the incumbent. So you have to pick a race where you disagree and believe vehemently in what you stand for that's different from the opposition. And then you have to be willing. People think that political campaigns are glamorous. I mean, even when you're not pregnant and throwing up everywhere you go, political campaigns are not glamorous. It's hard work. And, you know, you'd be willing to stand at the factory gate at 5:30 in the morning and then go to the diners at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to the senior center at noon and then at 3 o'clock be back at the factory gate and then be at the spaghetti dinner later. And unless, you know, you run for president or governor the first time out, those are the kind of things that win elections. I still have frostbite in one hand from being at that factory gate at 5:30 in the morning, but it was worth it.
Okay, now we really are running out of time. So let's try to
make
be
it
brief with the
really
questions
short.
now.
I just couldn't leave without addressing this question. Governor Swift, you're an incredible role model. Thank you for all you've done. My name is Minnie Timaraju, and I'm the director for the New Hampshire Senate Democratic Caucus. And I'm new to New England, so it's really awesome to be here. My question is specifically, however, directed at Congresswoman Sanchez. I'm a UC Berkeley grad, so I'm a former Californian. My question is about your experience as a woman of color. I couldn't leave here today without asking specifically for you to address that. I glanced around the room, and I've seen so many women of color, and I just wanted to ask you to share your experience and some advice specifically on that issue. One of the things both of you talked about is how important it is to get campaign experience. I didn't get on a campaign until I was 28 years old, and all my superiors on the campaign were 22 and 23-year-old, no mean to offend anyone, but white boys. It was really hard and weird. I had gone a more traditional route. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My parents said, go to graduate school. So I had a law degree. I had a career. And I said, I want to be in politics. There was no network for me. I had to kind of create my own network. I was just lucky, and I was just really persistent. And I've really, the whole experience has just been fascinating and exciting and empowering. But to see someone like you, I'm at your position, I just had to take the opportunity to ask you to share some of your insight on that.
Well,
'cause for women of color, it's hard.
We call it the double whammy. And I have my African-American counterparts and Asian counterparts that have been in the House with me. You know, in the Latino culture, it's also very, very difficult to me. Look, the women, Hispanic women run their families, we run the community, we do everything, but for some reason, you know, we're not supposed to run for politics, or we're not allowed to run for politics, or the same thing happens. So first of all, when I talked about the infrastructure, you ran right into it. A 22-year-old Anglo male is you know, he's moving up the chain, and he's, you know, first position that comes open where he's ready to go, they're going to put him in, and that's it, and that's who they're going to run. And forget about you. Even though you were a volunteer and maybe you raised $1 million for that campaign, what you did doesn't count. So the answer is we have to make our own organizations, our own structures, our own machinery, if they're not going to invite us into theirs for something other than you raise the money, but, you know, just stay in the background. Secondly, at least as a Hispanic, the most negative people towards me in my campaigns have been Hispanic males, believe it or not. So it's kind of a real ugly thing. I remember when I first ran, the only prominent Democrat that backed me was this Anglo guy who was really big, and the Latino boys went to him and said, and of course this was in the primary, they were backing the Anglo guy who wasn't even from the district, and I was a female Latina that nobody knew about, and they went to him and they said, we're backing the white boy, stop backing Sanchez. And he looked at them, he said, you always come in here and you scream and yell at me about how I never back Latino candidates, and the one time I backed a Latino candidate, you don't want her. Yeah, and they said very ugly things about me, none of which were true. They actually wrote it in a letter. And so the answer is, you know, you cannot depend on the infrastructure. You can try to be a part of it, but if it's not working for you, you got to make your own.
Okay, and I'm sorry to do this, but we just have time for one more.
Thank you. I don't have a question, but I have a comment to make. My name is Sandra Umaña. I am one family scholar, single parent, work full-time, and I go to school. And I probably won't have the opportunity to run for an office, but I believe that every woman still has power, even though doesn't have the opportunity to run for an office. Everybody has the power to vote, and we should use it wisely. So that's all what I want to call everybody that is not, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Probably I will never run for an office, but I'm concerned about the social issues. I'm part of the minority. I'm Hispanic, a single mom, and I think we can make a change if we use our vote wisely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm gonna break the rule. We just had let you ask your question because we didn't have a question there. Just one more right there.
Thank you. I am really privileged to be here today. My name is Tawa Pittman, originally from West Africa, now a citizen of the United States. I live in Cranston, in a city where there's no one that look like me. If they're there, they're not visible. Fortunately, our mayor have break the boundaries. For the first time in that city, we have a city solicitor who is a black woman. And I have advocated for a lot of issues in that city just to try to bring awareness, cultural awareness in the city and diversity in the city. And my point is getting through, but very slowly. And I thought maybe if I run for office, you know, I might bring some changes. So this year I'm running for city council as a start. But just to revisit your question, Congresswoman Sanchez, I really want to know how we can women can stand behind women candidates to support us and empower us. Because not only, I'm not worried because I've gone out with the mayor. You know, I talked to the mayor and he said, well, come talk to me some more. I gave him my background and he was pleased. And he had this walkathon in the city where he invited me to walk with him. And I thought, well, you know, this is a start to see what's going to happen. We were all nervous.
Okay, I'm going to let you answer that question.
Yeah, but.
So the question is?
How can we get empowerment from other women?
Well,
support us.
Women need to begin to realize they need to support women. First of all, women need to decide to run. We need to encourage women to run, and then we need to support them. What does that mean? We need to get money to them. We need to put them. We make up a lot of the machinery, of the normal machinery. It's just that we've been using them for the typical candidate. We need to go over and use it for the other women. How do we change women's minds? The only way we're going to do it is by talking to each other, is by going in front of each other, is by pushing each other. And the last thing that I want to say is, the nice thing now, and I think the governor will agree with this, is that we have more women in political office now who are beginning to have the ability to raise money, to yield, to use power on behalf of other women, and we are making that outreach to help women understand how to run and to encourage them to run. We're bringing in the women who are in business, who are making good paychecks, and making them understand the importance of giving, and that's both on the Republican and the Democratic side, and I don't know about the third parties or the independents, but at least in the Congress, Nancy Pelosi, for example, has taught most of us how to reach out and how to bring other women along and how to put money behind them, how to encourage them to run. So, you need to contact us because we want to help women to run and be successful at it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. And thanks for your questions. They were much better than mine. Glad we opened it up. I want to thank the audience for a wonderful participation and for the questions you had. I want to thank Martha Raddatz for a great panel discussion. And Governor Jayne Swift and Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, it was a real pleasure to have you open up this event for us today. Thank you.
Thank you.